Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. So first up, for T&D today, I have the Give Me Cookie, Got You cookie mug that I got for my fiance, I believe last Valentine's Day. It might have been for her birthday instead. They're pretty close together. And in it, I have some of my favorite tea, the Harney & Sons Gunpowder Green Tea. So I've been asked a couple of times how I could possibly like just straight green tea, because I don't put anything in any of my teas, ever, really. I just drink it straight out, because a lot of people seem to think that it's really bitter and gross. Quick little tea fact from me here before we get into what we're actually talking about. Different teas have different, like, steeping temperatures that you're supposed to be doing them at, and so green teas is not boiling, which is what most people make tea at. Green teas is actually like 160, 165 degrees for, like 4 minutes maybe. And so if you're steeping it for more than 4 minutes at a much higher temperature, you're just burning the leaves, and that's why it tastes so bitter. Fun fact, look up what temperature your tea is supposed to be before you start making it, and you'll probably enjoy it quite a bit more. That's what I got for you on that one. So anyway, moving on to what we are actually going to be talking about today. What is the edgiest subclass in each class? This actually came courtesy of my good friend Brooklyn Tuesday. She messaged in a group that we're in together about paladins being like the edgiest class overall, and it just started sort of the ball rolling in my head about what the edgiest subclass in each class actually is, because we talked back and forth about it for a little bit. And so I put together a list of what I think is the edgiest subclass in every single one of these, and we're going to go ahead and talk about it. Now, the definition of edgy gets a little bit loosey-goosey depending on who you talk to. So with that in mind, this is like, in my mind, the sort of traditional edginess that you would find in many different forms. Like the edgelord kind of aesthetic and vibe that you get. Obviously, any D&D player can be excessively edgy depending on how you play them. This is just what the flavor that is baked into the subclass kind of hands you. So let's talk about this for a second. We're just going to go in order of the classes, so we're not going to like do anything special or fancy, no rankings or anything like that. It's just what I think the most edgy in each one is. Starting off with Artificer. I say in order. We're going in alphabetical order, obviously. Starting with Artificer, this is kind of a softball one, because Artificer has the fewest subclasses. It's really only gotten the one release, essentially. So there's only 4 to pick from here, and none of them are like inherently super edgy. But I'm going with Alchemist, because the Alchemist, when you're put up against a guy that makes a dog buddy for himself to fight alongside, Tony Stark, and someone who walks around with a little cannon, the Alchemist, the one that like makes stuff and like drinks it and has like crazy effects happen to them, feels the most edgy to me. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not. You guys should definitely let me know what you think the edgiest ones are, because I am fascinated by how everybody interprets edginess for some strange reason, but I am, I guess. So I'm going with Alchemist because they create things, drink them to alter their bodies and other people's bodies as sort of like as their main way of essentially interacting with the world, we'll say. Next up is the Barbarian. This one I might just be like, I don't know, biased towards because of the fact that I have seen all of Critical Role several times over, but I think that it's the Zealot Barbarian, simply because of the fact that you can have like a necrosis kind of vibe to your whole Zealot Barbarianism thing that you've got going. That is baked in there. You can do that as part of like the subclass. And so to me, at least, the Zealot Barbarian is the one that has the most edginess sort of baked into it. But again, it might just be because I watched 140 odd episodes with Yasha, who is, she's, I mean, as goth as it gets, really. Shout out to Ashley Johnson for making that character, because I love Yasha so much. Moving on to our bard here. This one for me is actually a toss-up. The obvious choice is the College of Spirits because of what it is. It's all about ghosts and ghost stories, that sort of thing. That feels like, you know, the like edgelord kind of vibe. But I actually also have on here the College of Whispers, which I think is a different sort of take on the edginess thing, because they have a lot of like psychological terror stuff going on. So in my mind, that is a little bit more towards what I would consider edgy, but I think the more traditionally edgy is the ghost stories bard, just by nature of what it is. Because, ghosts. I don't really have a better explanation for you than that. Moving to the Cleric, this one's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. The Death Domain Cleric, that's it. It's the Death Domain Cleric. They have abilities labeled like Reaper and stuff like that, so it really just kind of fits the best out of really all of them. Especially when you're going up against, you know, Light Domain Cleric or Forge Domain Cleric. Like, yeah, they can all be edgy. Again, like I said at the beginning, any of these can be edgy, but it is kind of definitely the Death Domain Cleric. The only one that comes kind of close in my mind is the Grave Domain Cleric, but that's the way it's written is a little bit more peaceful. Again, might be biased because of Caduceus, who is my favorite Critical Role character ever. But the death part of it, in and of itself, kind of like seals that one up, you know. Kicking it over to the Druids. This one was also, it seemed like pretty easy, but I could see plenty of arguments for different interpretations of this. For me, this is the Circle of Spores Druid. This one is all about sort of decay and rot and ultimately death and stuff like that, which again is kind of that like that little niche that the traditional edginess sort of sits inside of. You're gonna kind of notice here that pretty much anything with a class feature that allows you to create undead or undead thralls or something like that, probably going to get the vote unless there's a big reason why on a different one. Over to the fighter. This one, to me, is pretty cut and dry, but at the same time it's not. I went with the Echo Knight, just because of what it is. You're sort of like interacting with your own shadow the whole time. And some of the feature names are like Unleash Incarnation and that sort of thing. So it has sort of like that, I'm an edgelord kind of feel to it, which makes sense because that is a lot of what they end up, you know, writing with the Critical Role books. And I have a little asterisk next to this one simply because a lot of people don't necessarily recognize the Critical Role stuff as the best, like, balanced and written and stuff like that. I think that it's great. I think it's, well, it had to go through all the same sort of playtest stuff as everything else that gets published. But I do see where they're coming from with, like, the vagueness of some of the writing on some of these features. So I also have the Roon Knight in here. This one, that is a little bit more left field, but it feels like more than any of the other ones, really, except for, in my mind, the Echo Knight with their Shadow Martyr, Legion of One, Echo, Avatar, Unleashed Incarnation, that sort of thing. The Roon Knight lets you sort of, it allows you to be able to be the edginess sort of person there. It's all in there for you to be able to grab and run with if you want to. The other ones, like, your Cavalier isn't going to be your edgelord by default, necessarily. If you play it that way, great, but it's not going to be, like, the one you go to, you know what I mean? And so that's why I have that little asterisk next to that one. They don't have, like, a non-Critical Role, traditionally edgy fighter subclass that I can think of off the top of my head. But the Echo Knight definitely sort of stands out in that category, followed in my head by the Roon Knight. Moving on from the fighter, we have the Monk. This one, not necessarily a toss-up for me, but it again goes back to the different interpretations of the edgy thing. So I have written down, maybe obviously, the Way of the Long Death. Like, again, talking about death, The feature names are All About Death, Touch of Death, Hour of Reaping, Mastery of Death, Touch of the Long Death. Like, it... I mean, come on. It's sort of like laying it out there for you. There is also 2 honorable mentions in this one. There is the Way of Shadow, which also kind of fits with the whole, like, edginess thing. But the Way of Shadow is more about literal shadows and less about, like, the metaphorical shadows of our souls. And so with features like Shadow Art, Shadow Step, Cloak of Shadows, Opportunist, doesn't quite fit as well as the ones that are literally all about death. Additionally, to the honorable mentions list in this one is the Way of Mercy Monk. This is maybe my favorite monk subclass, but given that it can push people closer to death or further away from death with the whole Hands of Harm thing, and mercy, it's got like a weird power thing associated with it, but I do, in my head, associate it as kind of an edgy subclass. Again, maybe that's just me, but that's, I'm the only one talking right now. So, you're getting just me instead. Next up is the Paladin one. This one, pretty straightforward. As you would expect from the one that can let you create undead, the one that came from the villain option in the DMG, we got the Oathbreaker here. This is actually the one that Brooklyn Tuesday was talking about when she was telling me that they are... this is what she cited when she said that Paladins are the edgiest subclass, followed by, actually, Paladins might be the edgiest class overall, which I don't necessarily disagree with. I just think there are subclasses that outrank Paladin as a whole. But the Oathbreaker Paladin, I mean, come on, right? Like, you've got Aura of Hate, Dread Lord, your channel divinity is Control Undead and Dreadful Aspect. Like, they all feed right into that sort of, like, Lord of Darkness kind of thing that, you know, you got going on when you're trying to be as edgy as possible. Next up is the Ranger. This one was kind of a cut and dry one for me as well. I went with Gloom Stalker. The name alone kind of tells you exactly what it is. You stalk things in the gloom. There is, of course, plenty of stuff in here that makes it not necessarily just a straight-up edgelord, but there aren't necessarily a lot of classes that make a like... a lot of subclasses in the Ranger that make a, like, solid edginess sort of character. Other than the Gloom Stalker, it's all about, like, staying hidden, staying in the shadows, attacking from hiding, that sort of thing. In addition to, like, attacking extra, and there's a reason that a lot of people think it's the best Ranger subclass. It is. I love it a lot. But the honorable mention for this one would be the Monster Slayer. Again, because of what it is, it fits that traditional sort of, like, I'm gonna go out and hunt big scary monsters kind of edgy, as opposed to the world is darkness, edgy. You're just getting a lot of the weird voice I do sometimes, apparently, in this episode. Following the Ranger, we have the Rogue, which this one is kind of a loaded question, ultimately because of the fact that the Rogue is generally touted as the edgiest of all of the classes. You have your stereotypical edgelord rogues, always. That's what people always talk about. And so it is with great acknowledgement of this fact that I make the declaration that the Phantom Rogue is the edgiest rogue. And I will not be taking questions on that one. You can argue for Assassin all you want, but the Phantom Rogue is literally about snatching the souls of the things that you kill as their ghosts whisper in your ears. You don't get more straight up traditional edgy than that. In my mind, this is the single edgiest subclass in all of 5th edition D&D. This was my main counterpoint to the Oathbreaker. Again, let me read you these feature names. Whispers of the Dead, Wails from the Grave, Tokens of the Departed, Ghostwalk, and Death's Friend. So it really is just all about being sort of that line between life and death, and like, but in like the aggressive way, not in like the Grave Cleric way. You might be saying, what about the Soul Knife? The Soul Knife, I think, is actually mislabeled. It is much more about like psionic stuff as opposed to like soul energy. The soul energy definitely comes from the Phantom Rogue. Again, I will not be taking questions, but also I will likely answer any questions because I can't really decide for some reason. Next up, moving on from the Rogue, it's all kind of downhill from here. I'm going to be honest with you. Some of these are pretty straightforward, like pretty obvious. We've got the Sorcerer. The Sorcerer, I went with Shadow Magic because of what it is. You might be thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense. You just said that the Way of Shadow Monk is more about actual shadows than that. Well, this is where they use shadow in the, like, more metaphorical way. Again, let's go over these class features real quick. Eyes of the Dark, Strength of the Grave, Hound of Ill Omen, Shadow Walk, and Umbral Form. It's all about darkness and, like, edgy, like, I'm gonna pull things from the grave and the hells and, like, bring it down on you. So there's that. It is, to me, the most traditionally edgy Sorcerer subclass. Now, there is an honorable mention in this one, in the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer. This is the slightly less traditionally edgy version, I think, of the Sorcerer, but in my mind also, still equally as edgy, because it leans into the more, like, aberrant horror sort of thing, the eldritch horror kind of thing that you get with, like, Cthulhu and that sort of thing, which is obviously a very big part of a lot of the culture that surrounds the subset of people that end up being, like, super edgy. These are the names of the different features in this subclass are not reflective of that, really, but they are they really sort of lean into the idea of being this eldritch being, essentially. So that's the Sorcerer. Moving on to the Warlock. This one is actually the one that I had the most trouble with. So I actually ended up giving it to two different ones. No asterisk, no nothing else, just straight out two of them. And Warlocks, as you might imagine, are often that kind of thing. There is an honorable mention with this one as well. But the two that I actually gave it to were the Fiend and the Undead. The Fiend and the Undead should kind of be obvious to you as to why. A deal with a devil is like the most traditionally hardcore edgy thing you can do as a person, or something like that. Making a deal with the devil, that's something that you hear about all the time in those kind of stories. And the Undead, as opposed to the Undying, because the Undying is more about subverting death, while the Undead is about bringing death. Important distinction there. Because, like, you make a deal with an undead being. Like, I don't really know how else to explain that one to you. The honorable mention here actually goes to the Hexblade Warlock. Specifically because of their Accursed Spectre feature, in addition to, like, a couple of the other ones where, like, ooh, Hex. Hex is important. That's just kind of the way that one goes. And finally, we have Wizard. This one, you can probably see coming from, like, miles and miles away. It's the Necromancy Wizard. Again, it's built around building these, like, necromantic thralls, that sort of thing. There's not one that's going to beat that out, really, at all. The Critical Role subclasses in this class as a whole are less about edginess and more about, like, time and space, which is cool and edgy in its own way, but it's not the, like, darkness demons sort of edginess. And that brings me to the end of all of my edgiest subclasses in each class. Let me know what you think, because as mentioned, there are plenty of different options here. People think a lot of different things. So let me know what you think about it. What do you think the overall edgiest class is? Because honestly, I am kind of inclined to agree that it could be Paladin, but I could also see arguments for Warlock and Rogue pretty easily. Moving on from that, we go to the shows that we have going on today. Tuesday, for whatever reason, is not as, super busy. Significantly more busy than Saturday was, but not as super busy as Monday or Sunday, which are our two biggest days. Excuse me. First up, we have Diary of a Dragon Pit, followed by Star Wars First Resistance, which is a SW5E game. If you don't know what that is, it is a port of the rules for 5th edition into a Star Wars universe, so that you don't have to learn a new system entirely, but that exists, but it's still 5th edition technically. Dungeons and Daddies, I believe, is back now. I think it's back. They were gearing up for their next season. I believe they started, but I'm not entirely positive. I couldn't figure it out. Bombarded, with Bard being all capitalized in the middle of there. Heck of a D&D, Glass Cannon, and again, not quite yet, but coming so soon, Sidetracked, the stream game that I am actually playing in, run by the lovely, evil Miss Brooklyn Tuesday. So be watching for that. I will definitely make a big fuss about it when we actually get it going. That is everything that I have to talk to you guys about there today. A big thank you to Arcane Anthems for the music in the back of this video. He makes incredible things. You can find him on Apple Music, Spotify, Patreon. Go check him out. He's got incredible, incredible RPG music. But that is everything that I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for making me part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much in particular to my patrons. You guys are the ones that make this show possible. If you're interested in becoming a patron, there is a link to my Patreon in the description of this. And yeah, that's everything I got. So don't forget, drink tea, play D&D, and keep on rolling.